welcome to another episode of AfterWords. This is our coverage on the Believers, Nonbelievers episode on the supernatural. Kelly Clemenson is joining me. I'm Phil Calderon. Someone charging their phone, but that's okay. So, Kelly, we both watched the episode. The episode had Peaches, I got her name right this time. She was a paranormal investigator. Gary Shook was the Wiccan high priest and also a teacher of Wicca. So, what did you think about the exchange?
It's interesting, entertaining, I guess, to a certain extent. As far as my ideas on what they were talking about, I agree with them in that there's another dimension. Before we know, and apparently from what cosmologists have figured out, or physicists, whoever it might be, there's 7 others besides that. They're arguing between 6 and 7, but either way, there's other dimensions that are, and I don't know how to get through string theory, but there are other dimensions that. Fifth dimension, and trying to figure out what that one might be like is like us, like a 2-dimensional creature trying to figure out what a 3-dimensional area would be. They don't know up and down. They only know this way and this way. So, trying to figure those out and how they work, I believe they're there, and I believe that at least maybe the 2 of them are communicating with beings from that realm. Beyond that, I have no opinions as far as those beings, but as far as just that part of it, yeah, sure. I'm whether either of them actually did, I don't know, because I don't know their experiences. But the fact that there's beings in that realm, sure, I believe that there is.
Yeah, I found it interesting that I'm always listening to people trying to figure out how they believe what they believe, and both of them were basing their beliefs on personal experience.
More emotional side.
Different types.
Yeah, I noticed that as well.
Yeah, I thought that was consistent.
And emotional experiences, there's validity to those.
Yeah,
as I said, it sounded like from what Adrian said, he had one too. He had some creature appear from a movie that he was watching, and only after a couple of years did he start thinking it was a dream. When he had it happen to him, he thought it was very real.
When he was young,
he was 10 years old, so that's not in the 3 or 4-year-old range. Right. That's 10 years, and the evaluation process of a 10-year-old is not quite what it is to a 30-year-old. But still, it's something that I think you recognize what's supposed to happen at 10 years old and what's not supposed to happen. Things appearing out of nothing at 10 years old. I think at 10 years old you'd be able to tell that that's not something that's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
I think your evaluation process is strong enough at that point to be able to figure that out.
Well,
so he had that.
You work with what you have, but I agree with you. Mm-hmm. And at some point, I don't remember if he said exactly what age, but it was somewhere not too long after.
I think he was kind of confused as far as not exactly. A couple of years later, he evaluated the screen. But
he figured out, or he decided it was something later. Peaches was also talking about her customers were kind of along the same route, where they believed in that supernatural things were happening, and so it was experience-based for them too. It was also interesting to hear that after they had done investigations on the properties, that the events had gone down, or perceived to have gone down, she mentioned. And then there were also the events spiking after horror movie releases and things like that. So
to tell you a story about The Exorcist in the 70s, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I saw that movie in, I think, 73 or 4, whenever it came out. It scared me to death. I was petrified over that movie because it was way too realistic for me. And I wasn't believing it. I had no idea what they were talking about with 666, all this stuff. No idea what that was. But when I got home, I was quite sure my bed was starting to walk around the room. And I was terrified. I couldn't sleep for a few nights. So I understand exactly what she's talking about. If I would have had some paranormal that I could have got a hold of at that point, I would probably call them and say, "Can you tell me what the heck's going on here? Is this any of this stuff real?" So I get what she was saying.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's your experience. Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm glad nothing showed up like that, because I'd probably not been sitting around an hour attack, and I wouldn't have been into that.
That's kind of what...
Anything that happened in that movie when it came around that I would have seen,
Yeah.
That would have been it for me. I would have been
We seem to be wired that way.
yeah.
So,
things are not supposed to happen like that.
I did find it interesting also where she said that some of her clients who were more religious seem to be, and granted, this is taken for what it's worth in terms of an anecdote of one person making an evaluation, seem to be more fearful of the events, particularly the demonic stuff. So you could possibly have a reinforcement from their religious teachings of what
either
might be,
sure. Either on an emotional level or an actual idea of evaluating what can be.
Yeah.
Because I evaluate it and I can see from what I read that it can be. Those things can happen because they're, like I think some of you guys probably hear when I was talking about the dimension thing, the flatland thing, the flatland story. Yeah. That type of thing, I believe that can happen because I believe that just as a three-dimensional creature, I can pass into the two-dimensional plane and do things that are very odd to those people that are in that plane. I believe the same thing can happen with a fifth-dimensional creature coming into our domain. It would appear suddenly out of space that we don't understand, and that would be disturbing.
Yeah.
So I get what she's talking about. I hope it doesn't happen to me. So prayed several times. Get to see
what was your impression of Gary's Wiccan practice and how he described how people in that community take their own what works for them is the way he described it?
Well, it sounded to me like, at least from what I listened to, that his the experiences were more emotional than they were physical. The magic that they were talking about was really more, I don't know, in temporary healing, like he described. Some pain went away for a couple days. More in that realm than it is the physical realm. Which, not to say that that can't happen. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying from what they were saying, it was more in the emotional realm than the physical realm. At least what I heard. There might be other, maybe they have sometimes when things actually happen, levitation, things like that. I don't know. I think it's possible. Whether they have that happen, I don't know. I think it's possible.
Yeah, I wonder about that. I mean, as a pharmacist, to me, the word that jumps out is placebo effect. So I don't doubt his experience, and I don't doubt his pain control, for example. In particular, the way he said it came on all of a sudden, and that can certainly happen. We know things about endorphins and whatnot. So that can happen. So I can kind of see a natural explanation for it. That doesn't discount a supernatural, but it's on the table. A natural explanation is on the table to me.
Well, there's stories about those type of things happening. I mean, the Exorcist movie that scared me so bad, wasn't the reason why then. But what I'm gathering, at least some of that is from true stories. They came about that movie by examples that were witnessed by several people. Same with another event that I was just was in my mind a minute ago. There was one out called Stigmata. That was a story from a police officer in New York of things that he witnessed. Some very odd stuff. I can't remember the name of the movie, maybe no. But there was a police officer in New York that got involved with this girl that was having some very odd things go on in her life. And it was those type of events, things that just don't make sense. It's not something we see. It's supernatural stuff going on, and it's scary.
Yeah.
But with her point, as far as the religious thing goes, religious families goes, as I said, maybe those people are more concerned with it because they know they maybe have an idea of who those entities might be. That's why it concerns me. It concerned me then, and it more concerns me now because I know I have a belief of who those entities are, and I don't want anything to do with them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about a trigger event. That if they believe that that's what it is, then that would make the experience that much stronger and give them.
Yeah.
Again,
Whether most of them are emotional, not that. But like I said, there are some examples, and I could probably find some. Some of them are made up, just like some of the alien stuff's made up, flying saucers, things like that. But there are some that seem to have some validity to them. They're seen by several people and doing things that are aeronautically not possible to have happen. Let me give you one particular instance, and this is one that I heard about from somebody that I have trust for. He was a pastor, and he showed up at the convention they have out at what's this place in New Mexico where the alien thing happened?
Roswell.
Yeah, Roswell. He showed up there, and he was just going out to speak on the I think the dimensional stuff that I was talking about. He was going out there to speak there, and this is a guy that is pretty grounded. I trust him. He's not into witchcraft, things like that. He said that he came there and came up to the microphone, and he heard such loud screaming going on and apparently unaudible to what the rest of the people were there, that he finally gave up on trying to talk. It was so loud to him, it was drowning him out. He couldn't speak, so he left. And he gave this account, and that type of stuff. Sure, I'm aware that stuff might happen.
How much credence do you give to that sort of anecdote?
It depends on the one who's giving it out. I mean, I think the person that is portraying that stuff happening, you have to evaluate where they're coming from. Is this somebody that has this happen 15 times a day and they get some money out of it? Like some of the stories that I agree with you guys probably, that some of the stuff that I didn't have and it came back type stuff.
Right.
You have to evaluate where that all came from and what the processes were after that. Are they selling 1 million copies of their book because of it? That would lead me to believe that there's maybe another motive as to why it's happened. But you know what? That doesn't necessarily mean that it's not true. But it leads me to be a little bit skeptical about it.
Yeah.
Whereas people that just explain it, and like this guy did, he felt this experience and he just explained it, that seems a little more credible to me because I don't see any motive for him to come up with that story. Because most people, when you start talking about seeing aliens, most people think you're a little nuts. That's the criteria.
Because when you say that, I see some religious beliefs essentially the same way. Now, obviously, you believe the validity, you see validity, or I don't. We're both trying to evaluate probabilities, but we're coming to different conclusions. In many cases, and that's why I talk about the idea some people are more susceptible to believe. And you've thrown that back at me too, so we both have to look at our own biases to make sure we're not making that same mistake on both sides, on either side.
Well, the reason why I would say that somebody that sees an alien from another planet, I find problems with credibility because the idea of travel from one to the next, I mean, I think we've pretty much come to the conclusion that there's no other life in our solar system. And venturing between solar systems, I don't know, maybe the advances could come, wormholes or whatever they talk about. But that kind of a trip, in movies like Star Wars, this kind of stuff, I go there for entertainment, that's fine.
Yeah.
But that kind of stuff, traveling from one star to another, I'm very skeptical that could actually happen. Because the power that's reason that comes into play, that you would have to expend, the time that you would have to expend to travel it, it's those set parameters that are, unless something changes, it's very hard to believe.
Yeah.
And as far as travel, the way we know travel,
right. That's exactly.
Once you go to different dimensions, then that's a different story.
To me, it's like I won't go quite that far. I'm with you in concept. I won't go quite that far because I leave the door open for there's information we don't know. I mean, we are a species that is not that old, right? I mean,
even humans are pretty young.
Just look at the technological, the industrial age, right? Late 1800s. It's trivial the amount of time. So take a culture that has been around for 2 million years, for example. We can't even project what they would know, and quantum physics and whatever has shown us that there is so much out there we really don't have a clue of yet. So I wouldn't close the door on it, but
unless something changed pretty drastically as far as travel goes, I'm going to maintain my skepticism about it.
Exactly. No, skepticism is, I think, is totally justified. I wanted to take you into sort of the broader issue of supernatural, which is since that's basically the topic. And now, okay, Wicca aside, and ghosts aside, my question is how does one judge how do you know that the supernatural exists? How do you make that evaluation?
We're not going to start yelling at each other like me and Brad did, because that's where we were going from before. I was just kidding. I know you won't. I was just teasing. Well, as far as my evaluation goes, it grounds itself in what I was talking with Brad about. The dimensions, like I said, there's physicists that believe and I think you could say a majority of them believe there are 7 other dimensions that we don't know about. So that type of thing allows me to evaluate things on a credible basis. I mean, these people are much more educated than I am, and they're thinking there are other dimensions that we don't know about. So that type of thing leads me to believe that supernatural. How do you describe that? And to me, supernatural is anything outside this universe, because this universe is what is natural to us.
Okay.
If you add the word super onto it, then you have to actually impose outside our universe.
Yeah.
So if you have other dimensions,
I mean, natural would be operated by the standard laws.
What happens in our universe?
The laws of physics.
Right.
Within the universe, within
Organizing
space.
principles that run our universe.
Yeah.
But if you venture outside that, then my definition is that would be super.
So now you've accused me and other atheists of excluding. No, I mean you have. I mean,
Yeah.
You brought
You're right. I accused Brad of a few things, so that's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm open. You brought up the wanton quote.
Yeah.
Right.
I have that in the car. Should brought it.
People don't let a divine foot in the door. Right. So that's basically the philosophical naturalism position.
And I said the same thing about Dawkins. I think Dawkins would have a tough time.
Yeah.
I would have a tough time feeling that Dawkins is objective on the idea of
I think he's shifted a little bit, but I'm going to leave that aside. Certainly, a lot of what he says gives that indication from his work of 20 years ago. But I want to look at the idea of, does supernatural exist without excluding its possibility? Okay. Now, first off, on what you said, the extra dimensions, the 11 dimensions, that comes from string theory. Now,
I'm going to have to read up on that, but okay. I'll assume that's
but we don't know enough. I mean, if we had astrophysicists here, maybe they could answer this better. But as I understand it, we don't know enough. We don't know nearly enough to know if that's actually an accurate thing. It is an early hypothesis. We called it speculation, I think, earlier. So it's an idea on the table. I don't put that much validity in it yet.
Well, if it comes from string theory, Phil, then I'm going to be pretty skeptical of it too, because I'm pretty skeptical through string theory. And I don't. Yeah, if that's it, then I'm not aware of it. So I would be skeptical of it as well.
So putting aside anything that we know now, how can you judge whether or not a supernatural realm exists? Okay. Now I've written down 3 possible conditions, and I want to see if this makes sense to you. See if you think this is correct or incorrect. Okay. So option number 1 is a supernatural realm exists but does not interact with our universe. That's a possibility.
Theist. That's what the theology of it would be. Is theist.
Yes, that
kind of got it, kicked it off, started it, and just forgot about it.
That's a possibility.
Yeah,
but
that describes what you're getting at. Is
that's within that set.
Okay.
I mean, it could be out there. It could totally not interact with our universe. There may be an outside intellect. There may be nothing. There may just be another physics universe of different physics, and we just don't interact. But we have no way of really identifying it. Other than as a concept.
Yeah. Just before you get to the next one, my opinion of that would be why bother?
Okay, I'm just saying.
Why bother? I mean, my point is not for you, but I'm saying if you're positing that, why would you bother? If he kicked things off long ago and has no interest in what's going on, why posit it? I wouldn't be interested in figuring out who that is.
Okay, that's an interesting.
That's just an evaluation of the deist position. What the Christians call the deist position is that if you're going to submit somebody that basically gave it a kickstart and then left,
Right.
I would say why posit it? Because it has no purpose. It has no meaning towards.
Well, I'm not into.
But it's
I'm not into the don't posit it.
It's an intellectual thing, but I don't see that to be anything that would be worth considering. I mean, if that's all it is, and there's no.
I'm trying to be open in terms
Yeah,
of
okay.
possibilities.
I'm just saying that's, and I don't,
Right.
because if you move on to the next one, I'll forget about the first one.
Well, I can probably remind you, but that's interesting that you say that because the why posit is kind of what an atheist would say about a theist position later on.
That's not a theist, that's a deist position.
Okay, we'll get to it. So, okay, that's one option that it exists and it kind of influences our universe. Within that, as a subset, you could also have there is an intelligent agent that is either unable or willing to communicate or intervene. Right, or you could have the deist, the deity who creates the thing, pops it off, and then goes off and does something else, pops off another one, something else, or whatever, or even did it accidentally. You know, like you made a footprint over here, you did something that was intentional.
Like what Eric about the African thing that threw up and then moved on.
Yeah, exactly.
So
that's a possibility. Now, the science position on this would be that we don't know of such a thing other than it as a concept, as a philosophical concept, because science would have no evidence to work with.
Well, that's some of it, but I would say there's science positions that dictate that there is a uncaused first cause. That's what I said with Brad. So I wouldn't say that that's monolithic. That conversation me and you had with Keith at the restaurant, I don't find that to be monolithic. I think that's something that's sometimes assumed, but and maybe it might be the majority opinion. I don't know, but the majority opinion doesn't necessarily make it right. The science position doesn't necessarily exclude an uncaused first cause. I don't find that to be the case. So all I'm saying is that position that is science, that's not the only option that science considers.
But you're right. That is a good point.
It is one option. I'm not saying that it's not an option.
I didn't think of that because you're right. If science comes up with a first cause, okay. Let's move on to option 2 because that's I think maybe where it comes in. So I kind of did a comparison between science and religion under each of these situations, and under a religious lifestyle, there's a supernatural that does not intervene. You would have presumably believers believing what they believe, and prayers and everything. Prayers would not be answered. There'd be nobody there.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly, even if there was a first cause deity only, you wouldn't have any idea about what the intent would be because you have no information other than it's just an argument. It's just an explanation, possible explanation for that we exist, period.
Right.
As far as you can go.
Yeah.
All right, so we agree.
We agree on that.
That one. Cool. Okay. Option 2, supernatural realm does not exist.
Okay.
Okay, which is generally what a scientist or an atheist would believe.
I would say atheist, but and some science, sure. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll give it a subset.
Okay. So if it truly does not exist, there is nothing there. Okay. Whether or not we certainly could not prove it, but let's just say it's not there,
Okay.
and we don't know. This is from the religion side. Again, you have prayers not being answered because there's nobody to answer them.
Right.
Correct.
You're talking with the stars.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Under the science side, I see this as compatible with what we actually do see. Okay. This is where because we don't see prayers answered from the science studies that we have. I know you're going to disagree with me on that.
I would.
We can.
But I think the idea of that is, well, first of all, the Journal of New England Medicine says that people that are prayed for do heal quicker. Now, you could say that that's because of emotion or whatever.
Actually, I just listened to that.
Yeah.
They said that when in that study, which is the best study because it's the biggest study apparently, that the people who got better were the people who knew they were getting prayed for. The people that were prayed for, because it was a well-controlled study, there was no difference. The people who knew they were being prayed for actually, I believe, did worse because they were like, and they postulated it was just like maybe anxious or something.
And they could think that the only option for answered prayer is that their cancer got better.
Yeah.
And that subset, that idea is that the prayer is going to make you better here. That's not necessarily the case. Because God can heal, and in the Christian realm, God can heal by giving you home. That's another form of healing. So that is coming from a particular standpoint. And okay, so
in a controlled study, it showed it didn't help. But I know people disagree with that.
There's events.
It's a matter of looking up the things. But let's stick with.
There's events outside that though that do come into play, and they're usually not here, but more so in countries where maybe they don't have medical treatment facilities we do here. And those are things that don't get reported in the news, but they do happen. Healings in places. Now, am I talking about particular?
Because that's going to be our third scenario. We'll get to
Let's
that.
Move on to that.
Let's stay in
Stay focused.
The does not exist piece for now.
You got to tell me focus every once in a while.
We both tell each other that constantly when we do emails.
Okay.
So we don't see praise dead. We don't see the earth stopping. I mean, it's written in the Bible that happens, but we don't see it in day-to-day life. Unexplained things that are just there are certainly unexplained things. I mean, and believing in ghosts or having ghost experiences, for example, is an unexplained thing. Science doesn't always have explanations, for sure. But there being nothing there would be compatible with naturalism in the sense that we just don't know why. And you criticize me for saying don't know, but that it is compatible with that. It is also compatible with what I call believance, which is credulousness, right? If people believe things that aren't really true, and let's just say conspiracy theories or aliens to keep it off the religion topic, they could still believe that and be just incorrect in a world where supernatural things don't exist. So it's consistent with that. In science, the progress of science, you would expect to see what we do see, which is that science progresses slowly based on what it has known before, and then someone comes up with a new idea, and they go do experiments, and they prove it to be true or false. You would expect the knowledge pool of science to grow slowly, progressively over time, and that's what we do see. So not existing, I think, is compatible with what we actually see.
Well, as far as the group that you have to evaluate, maybe that's somewhat limited.
What group?
And the group that you're talking about, the information group that you have, the study size, like Brad was saying, study size. The group that you're evaluating, I don't see this. Maybe you're not looking close enough. Maybe when somebody is cured of cancer, you figure, well, the body did it. And that's to me, that's a biased viewpoint. That I don't know how the cancer got cured, but I'm pretty sure it's not God.
So
that's because there are, and you can find many different examples of people getting cured of things that the doctors can't figure out how they got cured.
Correct.
So if you just say, well, the body did it, we're not quite sure how it did it, then you're discounting the idea that there could be a healer. someone who designed it in the first place,
Yeah.
knows how it functions, and can fix it.
Yeah, and some people do discount it. That's the philosophical naturalism.
But I think all of it's philosophical because you're looking at things and deciding without the complete sample size that, based on our sample size, we see this. Well, there's exceptions as far as, like I said, there's been many documented instances where people get healed with things and the doctors can't figure out how it got healed. And there were people praying for them. I would assume maybe sometimes it's people that aren't affiliated with religion, as you would call it.
Yeah.
So there might be, but those events do happen. So I as far as the example you're giving there, I would say there are exceptions to it. But as far as making it 100% determination on it, just because maybe you don't know how it happened, that doesn't make it to 100% because you're not sure how those people got healed.
Neither side gets to 100%. I mean, neither side can know something is true or not true. I've talked about my scale of belief. It goes from 0 to 100. To be perfectly honest, you cannot be at 0 or 100. You cannot 100%. There's always going to be doubt. So we really exist in the 1 to 99 range, which is why I don't agree with the comment that it's philosophical. It's all philosophical because you're right. Many people do say, and it may be sort of a casual way of using language that supernatural stuff can't happen. But if you pin them down, even Dawkins has said that if you pin them down to an intellectual honesty, that you cannot discount. We cannot disprove a supernatural or prove natural at 100%. So it's just that on the science side, it appears to all work without a supernatural.
Dawkins said that?
Yeah, he uses a 1 to 7 scale. That's interesting.
Because I never heard him say it. I never heard him.
He gets pretty angry, obviously. Yeah. He always kind of stays with say, I don't believe. But there's a couple of things out there where
I have to get him moving from 0 to 3.
He uses a 1 to 7 scale, or 0 to 6.
On a scale of 1 to 1,000, I'll move from 0 to 3.
Yeah, but it's an interesting thing because it's a moment of honesty for him.
Okay, I haven't seen it. I'm going to have to look it up because I've seen very rare times when he was on that.
So option number 3 is that supernatural realms exist, and this is not to say anything about what exactly they are. Just supernatural, something other than natural.
Yeah, because like I said, these two
does influence our universe.
These two wouldn't be on the same page as me that it exists, but they would say
I'm trying to differentiate. Yeah. I'm trying to differentiate the sheer existence or non-existence of it versus people's belief of it.
Yeah. Okay. Completely what it might be. It's just that it exists.
Right. Okay. So the third option is that supernatural realms do exist and it does influence our universe. Now, there may or may not be an entity or a deity or a god in this. It may be, for example, the discovery that dark matter is the universe is expanding greater than one would expect at a greater speed. And the explanation they have come up with is dark matter. Well, dark matter is not. They don't know what that is. It's just a phrase that they've thrown in there.
Right. And because there's not enough gravity to be keeping things
there's another
rate that expanding. There's no gravity to stop it.
Right. There's another variable that's going on that we are not aware of, and one of those hypotheses even is that there could be an alternate dimension or universe that is somehow coming through and influencing our side. So maybe dark matter is actually not something that is physically in our universe. These are all speculative hypotheses. So there could be an influence that does not involve deity. So that's one possibility. Mm-hmm. There could be an intelligent agent, for sure. That's another hypothesis, who is willing and able to communicate and intervene. That's another possibility. And then, of course, you go all the way to your position, which is there could be a God, capital G, Abrahamic God, right?
Yeah.
Existing outside of space and time, influencing our universe. From the religious side, you're going to see prayers being answered. So that's another possibility. You could have. Now the problem is. Now I know you're perceiving, you and many others perceive that there is evidence? You talked about looking for evidence, and I see a lot of people doing this in the creation field right now, looking for scientific evidence and interpreting what they see as science as being evidence for a supernatural. And then people on the science side are saying, no, that's basically philosophical speculation. You have ideas, but you don't have excuse me. What that was. That you've got things happening, but you don't have a way to pin it on a deity. You don't have a way to pin it on an external agent or a you don't know what that is, other than there's something possibly there. Does that make sense? Or did I just ramble for 5 minutes, which I've done before?
Well, at least it wasn't me rambling this time.
I can ramble.
Well, sure. Of course, there's in my mind, I think, as we determined from the last discussion, that what side I'm on. And I think there is reasons to believe that there is a external causal agent, uncaused first cause, things like that. I believe there is reasons to believe that. Now, can you come up with hypotheticals that seem to find them necessary? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
But I think getting down to the odds, like I think I was trying to, what Brad and I were trying to communicate, was trying to figure out what those were. And I think evaluation is important. The truth is discovered by evidence, not by a common opinion. That's one of the things that I've put up on the Thursday night thing lately, is that truth is evaluated by evidence as opposed to consensus of opinion. Consensus of opinion has been wrong many times in our human history. Consensus of opinion has been wrong over and over and over again. When new facts are discovered, like Hoyle looking through his telescope and finding out the universe is expand, that was a major event in history, a major turning upside down of what they believed at that point. The steady staters were in the majority, and at that one event, things turned and went the other direction.
We've had paradigm shifts.
Paradigm shifts. That's what I was looking for.
But so does that mean that you're comfortable with the concept that if consensus is unreliable, is that the correct phrase? That individual opinion would be less reliable than consensus opinion?
Individual opinion can be correct or incorrect. All I'm saying is that there's been many times, and in the church, there's been many times, Galileo said, no, the Earth does not rotate around, or the sun does not rotate around the Earth rotates around the sun, and the church at the time, for whatever reason, I don't know why, felt the other way around. There's nothing in the document that would suggest that. But in the Catholic Church, there could have been some pope at some point that decided that's how it was. And according to their belief system, what the pope says is continuing revelation. And that's maybe why they thought that. I don't know. But if you consider that from the text that Christians use as submitted to us from God, there's no reason to think that the Earth would rotate, or the sun would rotate.
But just on a conceptual level, if you have one person with a strong opinion, whatever it is, and then you have a group of people educated in that field, somewhat knowledgeable, not just random, roll the dice, give me your answer kind of thing, with a consensus opinion saying more than 50%, wouldn't you think that the consensus is more likely to be true than the individual opinion?
It depends on how the individual writes his opinion. I bring up Hummel. He was in the severe minority.
Right.
And when he looked through his telescope and saw things that were expanding, he was in the minority. He was maybe one of the only ones that felt that the universe was expanding. But his idea, once the evidence was produced, changed everybody's minds. So that's one example I can give that happened. And there's other ones.
It does happen, but see, what would a
Galileo was the same way. He was one. He threw his butt in jail and just about killed him over it, but he was right.
I understand, and that's fine. But from a conceptual, again, I would say that you've got one person over here, 10 people over here. Let's just say they're all equally smart, and they all have the same information. This one makes an evaluation, the one person. The other 10 over there, they go through the same individual process. Okay.
I would say that
some of them are going to...
Yeah, the majority of the time, more than likely, if everybody's studying the project and one guy's got some screwball idea and the rest of them don't, probably, I would say the more often than not,
the majority. This is
an uncomfortable space. I would say sometimes it's like that. Because you're right, you can do evaluations on things and come to firm conclusions like gravity.
Right.
If somebody says, well, I don't really believe in gravity, it's, well, sorry, you can test it.
Yeah.
Like gravity's doing here. So it depends on what it is. But the general concept of the majority opinion being right.
No. Not right.
Correct.
This is distinction. No.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Tell me what you
Because I've been trying to work on this concept, and it's that it is more likely to be correct than an individual. Not that it can't happen either way, and we'll go over that in a second, but that an individual making an evaluation versus 10 individuals making an evaluation, the 10 is more likely to be correct. Now, there are biases that go the other way.
So we can add that too.
We can add that too. But even with those sort of like, we all sort of come together and reinforce each other's opinion kind of a thing, that bias is
and that's
in the other direction.
That's what I'd like to comment on, is that bias thing, because I believe that does come into play.
But that doesn't mean that the group consensus is less likely to be true than a single consensus.
Let's take an example of Nazi
You got
Germany.
bias on the single side also.
Let's take an example of Nazi Germany. I mean, they had a majority of people that felt that Jews and Muslims and whoever else was inferior to the superior race of Europeans. And the majority probably felt that was true. But that doesn't mean it is. And what I mean is that you can get into a closed-off society like Germany was at that point, completely, but somewhat closed-off society at that point, that Hitler did do some good things. I mean, he got their economy going again, so maybe they started thinking he had more brains than he actually did, obviously, without winning with that. But you can get an influence like that started and have it roll. Now, is it going to last that long? Probably not. But I see that as the bias thing goes, as far as like, I spent my life studying this, and I spent an awful lot of hours in contemplation of it, and I think those biases come into play, and it's difficult on both sides to change your mind.
So you think biases come in?
Maybe the majority feels
greater on the group side than on
sure.
the individual side.
A book I'm reading right now by Doug Axe, he's running into that bias, and it comes into play with the intelligent design movement and the orthodoxy of science. And he's doing good research. He's a very smart guy. He's came up with chances of proteins being produced as re-engineered at 1 chance in 10 to the 72nd power.
So he's feel about that from the origin of life.
Okay, but I'm just saying there's biases that exist that can restrict that something that you're talking about. I'm just saying that bias does come into play. And you're right. You mentioned it. First, so minus the bias, maybe, but they can also just be evaluating things.
I just have a hard time believing that there is less bias on the one person than there is on the 10. You've got more minds going at the same information. They all have bias. They all have the same intellect. We put them all on that same level.
What if the larger group, there was a reason for them to have a bias? that the community that is on that larger group is going to kick them out if they start having a different opinion. And that's what Doug Axe describes in his book. He came in with a certain viewpoint, and all it is just his evaluation of things. And because they attached a certain viewpoint to it, they dismissed him from the school. He was working in Cambridge in the biology department, and he came in with an intelligent design viewpoint. They tolerated him for a while until they found out what it was, and the director there decided that his space was the space that they needed, and they kicked him out. So, minus that part, Phil, I understand what you're trying to get at, but I think that does play an influence on it. Like you said, the bias exists, and if your livelihood is threatened because you might have a different opinion, as what you brought up in the movie with Ben Stein, if that really does exist, and I believe it does, then that group can be unduly influenced by other pressures.
But there's a difference between a bias. It'd be interesting to have a sociologist in here sometime to quantitate that bias, because I don't know. There is that bias within a group of opinions do tend to get reinforced. So that is one thing that has to be factored in on the evolution issue. Mm-hmm. You've got two different things, because if you have bias, if both sides were evaluating a philosophical situation, where basically bias was the only factor, then yeah, I could kind of buy that a little bit more. But in the evolution argument versus ID, we do have biases, but we also have evidence that goes one way more than the other. We'll have that discussion at another day.
I think we just had it, didn't we?
Well, we'll be more pieces of it, I
Yeah,
guess.
okay.
So I think that's why that particular one is not just based on bias, and that's why all positions should not be included, because otherwise we'd be teaching astrology as an option.
I think it does have to have some validity to it, which I agree with you. Astrology does.
I agree.
Yeah. Astrology has some lists of things, and I don't know. I haven't looked up astrology very often, but ones that have in common seem to have astrology seems to have a pretty rosy opinion of what your life's going to be going forward, generally speaking. And I don't see that actually taking place. That life always being rosy, just like fortune cookies.
Good.
You very rarely find a fortune cookie that says you're going to die tomorrow. They're almost always rosy. So I find skepticism in that, because it unfortunately doesn't play out.
And I want to say something, because that's an interesting point. And this is a critique of atheists. It comes out of the early Dawkins generation, that first thing that says that deists and believers don't use logic and reason. We know this is not true now. We know this is not true. And atheists need to stop hitting that drum. They need to move on, because there's enough science. These are the ones who are saying they're behind science that talks about cognitive belief systems. We know that that's not true. We know that, and I know through interacting with you all this time that your belief is thoughtful and sincere. I try to point out where I see logical errors, and you do the same.
Yeah.
But and I would like to see more studies of religious versus non-religious people to see where or what motivates the deviations. But this whole thing about reason is not only on one side; it is just not true. So please stop doing it. Please stop doing that.
And by the same token, Phil, there's plenty of organizations that, for example, a guy by the name of Ravi Zacharias, he's an evangelist, and he went to the Mormon church in Utah and spoke there. He got heavy criticism for that. A lot of people thought that, what the heck are you going up there for? That's a cult. You should stay away from them. They're evil, this, that, and the other thing. And, I looked at it was, well, why? I mean, If you don't think they're walking down the right path and they're headed towards, whatever damnation, if you care enough about them, you'll go there. And there's lots of people in the church that just wrote them off. And there's lots of people in the church that write atheists off too. And I'm not one of them.
Well,
I think that kind of attitude, just like what you said, there's that attitude on the Christian side too. They want to. I'm sure you've heard it. The arguments that are not that may not evaluate from evidence, but and not only that, but just be irritated and angry over whatever it might be.
But are you not writing me off because I'm a decent person, just given our interaction and everything, or that you hope I'll come around to the being saved way of thinking eventually?
Well, Phil, if you know anything about me whatsoever, you know that's the case.
The latter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not only that, Phil, but you're a friend of mine. I consider you a friend, so I come here and I talk to you about it, and I hope that I can stay friends with Brad. I mean, we got pretty heated. But I want to stay that way. I mean, I'm not angry at him because he disagrees with me. He's wrong. Just kidding. But I'm just saying that's not a reason to get upset. Now, if somebody wants to, start saying stuff that is unnecessary, then that ventures into the realm of why am I bothering? If there's an attitude towards all you're trying to do is just put the other person down, humiliate them, discredit them, if that's all you're trying to do and there's no attempt at understanding, then my reaction is, why am I bothering? Because it appears to me that there's no listening going on. And if you repeat over and over again, as I have, that my journey to faith was I'm not saying that it didn't start with some emotion, but my journey to faith had a lot to do with me evaluating what the statements are. And for somebody to come along afterwards and say that it all came about by emotion, I'm saying, well, have you listened to anything I've said? Are you trying to hear me at all? Is there any interaction going on? Because I think you may not agree with me or not agree with me, that's fine. But to try to say that I came about all of it by emotion, then you haven't been listening to what I'm talking about. You haven't been listening, you haven't been hearing my appeal.
Well, if you come about it by emotion, it is valid, but doesn't
I'm not saying that
necessarily mean it's correct.
No, I'm not saying that isn't, because a lot of people do, and they don't go through all the processes I did, and I actually admire them. They don't have to go through this nonsense that I went through. I'm just saying that if you try to criticize my journey by saying, and you're perfectly fine to do that, that's why I come here. But if you try to say that because I haven't evaluated the evidence, well, you haven't been listening to me. You may not agree with me. You can say that the evaluation of your evidence is faulty. Okay,
yeah.
I can accept that because at least you're listening to me. But to try to tell you that it's all been from an emotional event, you haven't been listening to me. And I have to evaluate whether or not it's profitable to consider it, to continue it, should I say. I don't know. Yeah. Well, like I said, you understand that I'm coming at it from what I consider a reasoned viewpoint. And I think the same with you. And I think you have your reasons to be where you're at. You don't come at it from strictly emotion.
Yeah, because there's I'm after truth, but I'm also after reducing friction between people with various belief systems, which is why we have to get into, and we will ultimately, the conflict issues, the places where belief systems overlap and force themselves on each other to the point of violence or educating the wrong way. Or
seems to be going on quite a bit these days.
Yeah.
So with all of it.
Anyways,
are we running out of time? Yes.
Are we an hour in?
About 5 minutes.
Okay. So let's just. Anybody have any questions or comments, and then I guess we'll wrap up. No, you're all good. This is so much more chill than the last episode. All right. Well, that was a nice thing. I'll leave it at that. would encourage everybody to join the Facebook group. Tell people about what we do here. Always looking for new people to come in and talk. We're covering many subjects over time, and the more people we have to talk with, the better. So.